Gerald noticed jealousy in Ricky's eyes, and he had an idea. It seemed that Ricky liked Daphne, so he showed great hostility to him. However, he didn't bother to pay him any attention. Gerald hated the Kenneth family, but not all of them. He just wanted to prove his innocence. As for the people who framed him, none of them could escape. As for other people, he was not interested. Peace was based on the condition that other people did not provoke him. Gerald ignored Ricky, but Ricky did not seem to want to let him go. He sneered at Gerald and said, "Gerald, you were thought highly of in the Kenneth family. Although you aren't a match for me, a direct descendant of our family, you are the most favored among the young people in the branches. During the dinner at the annual party, you were arranged to sit next to my brother. Our family wanted to make you my brother's right-hand man. Unfortunately, you took the wrong way and ended up being a model," Ricky said. "It's difficult for a person like you who has been in prison for so many years to find a job." Gerald raised his eyebrows. Daphne opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but it seemed that she did not dare to offend Ricky. On the other hand, Ingrid said, "Ricky, don't go too far. Gerald was invited by Daphne to be our model for free. Daphne invited me to come here. You heard it and shamelessly followed me. If you don't stop talking nonsense, please leave." Gerald looked at Ingrid in surprise. This girl was feisty. In Sacramento, not many people dared to talk to someone from the Kenneth family like this. Ricky slightly changed his expression but did not dare to say anything. Daphne pulled Gerald's arm and said, "Gerald, don't take it to heart, let's go to the painting room." Gerald shrugged and said, "It's all right." The four walked to the painting room together. Rich people could do whatever they wanted. Daphne was still studying at university, but she had a whole floor as her own painting room, and all kinds of tools for painting were there. Upon arriving, Daphne said, "Well, we will probably draw for 2 hours, and you may be exhausted after we're done. Just hold on. When we finish, I will treat you to a sumptuous lunch. Smiling face casual date is just a click away. Ads by Pub Future." Gerald smiled and said, "It's okay." At this time, Daphne pulled Gerald to a chair, and then her face turned red and she said, "Can you take off your clothes now?" Gerald was stunned. "We want to draw the outline of human muscles," Daphne said. Gerald scratched his head and said, "Well, even we don't feel shy, why do you?" Beside him, Ingrid said with a smile. Ricky did not speak, but his eyes darkened. He and Daphne had known each other for a long time, but Daphne had never talked to him like this. Most of the time, Daphne was always cold to him and wouldn't seriously answer him. She would never show shyness in front of him. He was furious. Beside him, Gerald coughed and said, "It doesn't matter. I'm just afraid that after I take my clothes off, you will fall in love with me." Bah! Ingrid spat. Daphne pouted and said, "Thank you. Just leave your underwear on. We will prepare the tools now. Just take off your clothes. After you're done, I will come over and put you into the pose we want." Gerald felt that these words were quite amorous, and he coughed. Daphne blushed and pulled Ingrid out. Ricky stood where he was and grabbed the drawing board. After fixing it, he stood up and walked to Gerald, saying, "Gerald, stay away from Daphne from now on. Daphne will only be my girlfriend and future wife." "Oh." Gerald rubbed his nose and said, "The last time I saw Justin, he said the same thing." Ricky's expression changed slightly, then he sneered, "That will be my competition with him. It has nothing to do with you. In short, you have to stay away from Daphne." "On what basis?" Gerald asked. "Because you are in Sacramento, and I am the third successor of the Kenneth family." Ricky sneered, "It's just a piece of cake to kill you." Gerald shrugged indifferently and said, "Then do it." "You." Ricky's expression was extremely gloomy. After a moment, he said, "You just got out of prison and don't have a job, right?" I'll give you some money and a job. How about you stay away from her after getting them? You are a student. Are you that rich? Gerald asked with a sneer. Ricky showed a hint of pride on his face. I have more than $160,000 as my pocket money every year. You don't even dare to think about the number. It will be easy to get you a job that can earn you more than $1,600 a month and make you live an easy life in Sacramento. Name your price. Gerald looked at Ricky and said, I'm sorry, I'm not interested. My dad is the vice president of Universe Group. He earns much more than $160,000 a year, so I can just live off him. You. Ricky sneered when he saw that Gerald wasn't going to budge. I'm giving you an offer of peace, you'll regret it if you turn me down. So what? What are you going to do? To kill me with your fierce gazes? Or drown me with your saliva? Gerald sneered, alas, in fact, I appreciate thick-skinned people like you. Daphne does not like you and even does not want to pay attention to you. If not for the fact that you are a direct descendant of our Kenneth family, she would have asked you to stay away from her a long time ago. But you still shamelessly pursued her. Gerald's words hurt Ricky so much. Fury filled Ricky's face, but he couldn't act up here, so he could only stare at Gerald and gnashed his teeth. Gerald shrugged indifferently, then took off his clothes, revealing his strong muscles. Then, he took off his pants with only his underwear left and sat down on the chair. Good. Ricky gritted his teeth and said, Gerald, just wait. I will let you know the consequences of provoking me in Sacramento. Gerald shrugged indifferently. During their conversation, Daphne and Ingrid came in with brushes. When they saw Gerald sitting there, Daphne's face turned red. Ingrid smacked her tongue and said, You have good shape. Gerald was speechless. Daphne walked to Gerald with a red face and said, Sit down. I'll put you into the pose we want. Then, she told Gerald how to pose. Gerald could feel that Daphne's breathing was much heavier than before, and he could even hear her heart pounding. She's a girl after all, Gerald sighed in his heart. If it were Red Rose, she would have pounced on me. Thinking of Red Rose's sexy figure, Gerald could not help but swallow his PFFT. Not far away, Ingrid seemed to have noticed something and laughed. After Gerald posed as the girls wanted, Daphne walked away with a red face. After sitting in front of the drawing board, she let out a long breath and then said, Keep this position. We are starting to draw. Just when Gerald was acting as a model for Daphne, in New Bank's Sacramento headquarters, watchman number 2 stood at the door. She adjusted her sunglasses and then walked into the bank. Hello, what can I do for you? In the lobby, a woman stood up and asked. Watchman number 2 glanced at her, then took out a blue card from her bag and said flatly, Get the person with the highest authority here to me. The woman who received watchman number 2 saw the blue card, and her eyes narrowed. The eyes of the woman who received watchman number 2 were full of shock. It was a diamond card. Kiera was transferred from Los Angeles to Sacramento because she was going to serve clients with diamond cards, and she was promoted a lot. And this morning, Kiera was promoted again. Now, she received a diamond card user. If she could serve the user, it would bring her a lot of money. Watchman number 2 said flatly, Don't make it public, get me a quiet room and then call the person in charge over. Okay, come with me. The woman suppressed the excitement in her heart, bowed slightly, and made a gesture of invitation. Soon, watchman number 2 was brought to a quiet room. The receptionist gave her a cup of water and said, Please wait a moment. Then, the woman walked out. About a few minutes later, Sterling pushed open the door of the room. When he saw watchman number 2 sitting there, his expression changed before becoming serious again. Then, he walked up to watchman number 2 and bowed. Nice to see you, Ms. Berry. Watchman number 2's full name was Caroline Berry. She raised her head and glanced at Sterling. The corners of her mouth curled up into a smile. Don't tell anyone that I came to find you, including the watchman. Sterling nodded. To understand, I saw Mr. Kenneth last night. It was all thanks to you that we. Caroline waved her hand and interrupted him. I came today for Gerald. Do you have his phone number? I only have his line account, Sterling said. But one of our employees now manages Mr. Kenneth's business. Call her over, Caroline said calmly. Sterling nodded and left. 2 minutes later, Kiera appeared at the door. She looked at Caroline, who had short hair and sunglasses. She asked softly, how can I help you? A night passed, and Kiera seemed to have adjusted her mood. At this time, she looked no different from her usual self. Caroline raised her head and glanced at Kiera. She smiled and said, sure enough, Gerald always likes beautiful women. You know Gerald. Kiera was stunned, and then, vigilance appeared on her face. You don't have to be nervous. I am familiar with Gerald more than you think, Caroline said calmly. Give me Gerald's phone number. Ads by Pub Future. Kiera looked at Caroline suspiciously. At this time, she noticed that in Caroline's hand was a blue card. Kiera's expression changed, and she said, why do you also have a diamond card? Only 9 diamond cards were in the world. Gerald already had one, but it was also the case for this woman. Is that surprising to you? I got it along with Gerald. It seems that Gerald didn't tell you his background, Caroline said with a smile. Kiera was stunned. I don't know much about his past. Being in the dark will only do you good. Give me his phone number, Caroline said flatly. Kiera did not doubt Caroline and gave Gerald's phone number to her. Caroline thought for a moment and said, give me your phone number, and you'll be the one serving me in the future. Kiera was stunned. She now served 2 diamond card users, which meant that she might be a higher up in New Bank. In a short time, she swallowed and said, what is the relationship between you and Gerald? Caroline took Kiera's phone and gave herself a call. Then, she smiled and said, perhaps, you will find out when you have a chance. As Caroline spoke, she put away her phone and walked out of New Bank. On the other side, Gerald maintained the same posture for more than an hour. He did not even move. As Ingrid drew, she felt surprise. They used to paint for models, but those guys would adjust themselves after maintaining the same posture for just about 10 minutes. It was rare to see someone maintain the same posture without moving like Gerald. Such a challenge was too simple for Gerald. Beep. At this time, Gerald's mobile phone that was next to his clothes rang. Daphne frowned. She walked over and picked up the phone and said, it is a strange number. Bring it over and put it near my ear, Gerald said. Daphne nodded. She took the phone and walked to Gerald. She connected the phone and put it near Gerald's ear. Hello, Gerald said. May I know who that is? On the phone, there was a moment of silence. Then, Gerald heard the sound of sobbing as if the caller was a little emotional. Hey, say something. Gerald frowned. Did you call the wrong number? At this time, the caller seemed to have calmed down, but her voice was still choked. Gerald, guess who I am? Whoosh. Gerald's mind went blank after he heard this voice. He stood up, grabbed the phone from Daphne, and asked emotionally, where are you? I will come to you now. Sitting aside, Ricky frowned and said, you're now still their model. Don't move. Don't you understand what I am saying? Gerald ignored him. He put the phone between his cheek and shoulder and quickly put on his clothes and pants. He was so fast that Ingrid and Daphne were slack-jawed. I am on Riverside Road, opposite Citibank. The voice sounded from the phone again. Stay there. I will be there soon, Gerald said and hung up. Then he turned to look at Daphne and said, Daphne, I'm afraid I have to go now. Make it another day. I have important things to deal with now. Ricky sneered, humph, important things. Aren't you just going to see your lover? I heard it. A woman was calling. Before Ricky could finish speaking, Gerald glared at him. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Ricky's words were stuck in his throat then. He swallowed and did not dare to say anything else. Ingrid was surprised. Then, a smile appeared on her face. Daphne nodded and said, "It's fine. My painting is almost done, and I just need a bit of follow-up. If you have something to do." Before she could finish, Gerald had pushed open the door and gone out. "That woman seems to be his girlfriend. When he answered the call just now, he was nervous," said Ricky. Hearing Ricky's words, Daphne frowned. At this time, Ingrid said, "Daphne, was Gerald in the prison?" "For 9 years. I think so," Daphne said. "Why do I feel that he went to serve the country instead?" "He didn't move in the past hour at all," Ingrid said with a smile on her face. "Such perseverance is not what ordinary people can have." Daphne was stunned and then looked at the door that was closing. She pursed her lips, lost in thought. Gerald ignored them. He rushed out of the building of Goldson Group and then hailed a taxi to leave. 15 minutes later, the taxi stopped in front of Citibank. Gerald paid the fare and got out of the car. Then, he looked around and saw a short-haired woman wearing sunglasses sitting on a stone bench not far away. His eyes became moist. Although he knew that watchman number 2 had survived, when Gerald saw her, he felt tears welling up in his eyes. In front of her stood a young man in a hoodie. But Gerald ignored him. He exhaled and walked forward. He stopped not far away from Caroline. Caroline was sitting there, but Gerald could see tears flowing out from her eyes that were under the sunglasses. Caroline said softly, "For every being who is breathing." Gerald smiled. His lips moved as he said, "We devote ourselves to the future we want." Then, the two spoke at the same time, "We shall never give up." As soon as they finished speaking, Caroline jumped up and threw herself into Gerald's arms. Gerald smiled and wiped his wet eyes. He clasped Caroline to him. "I knew that you would survive." Caroline hugged Gerald tightly. Then, she cried, "However, Terry will never come back. I saw the knife stabbing into his body to cover us and complete the mission. I saw him fall in a pool of blood, but I couldn't do anything." Thinking of the scene 3 years ago, Gerald had tears flowed out of his eyes while holding Caroline. "He won't die. I swear I will kill Franklin and uproot all his people. I will make all the underworld forces that joined in the battle pay a price." Gerald gritted his teeth and said firmly. Caroline held Gerald tight and kept trembling. They hugged for more than 10 minutes. Caroline calmed down a lot. She sniffed. Beside her, Eric, who was standing, handed her a tissue. At this time, Eric's face was full of excitement. It had been 3 years, and he finally saw Gerald. His hard days had come to an end, and he didn't have to work to raise this foodie. He could become a rich guy and run amok in Sacramento, spending money everywhere. So at this time, he also wanted to cry because his bitter days were over. Gerald looked at him, and he realized something. "Weren't you the one who followed me at the entrance of Flame Bar last night?" "You indeed noticed me yesterday," Eric scratched his head and said. "Your anti-reconnaissance ability is nothing in front of him." Caroline wiped her snot and then introduced Eric to Gerald. "This is my disciple, Eric Houston. 3 years ago, I was saved by him. What about you? How did you escape?" "Most of the people went after you." Gerald sighed. 3 years ago, I escaped with the steel box. Later, I was saved by an ordinary person. However, because I was severely injured, I lost my memory. Then, I became the matrilocal son-in-law of the person who saved me. Then, I was disliked by my mother-in-law. Every day, I came to the dock and construction sites and earned a living carrying bricks to support them. Caroline paused for a moment. She took off her sunglasses and revealed her slightly red eyes. "Ah, you married?" she asked. "Don't mention that. I am divorced. My mother-in-law disliked me for being poor and then found a rich guy for my wife. She forced me to sign the divorce agreement, Gerald said. Not long ago, Valerie found me and helped me recover my memories. Smiling face casual date is just a click away. Sign up and start meeting women in your area today. Ads by Pub Future. PFFT. Caroling laughed and said, then, your experiences in the past 3 years are much richer than mine. Gerald touched his nose and talked about his experiences in the past 3 years. He was helpless. He estimated that he would be ridiculed for a long time after he returned. Valerie and some others had spread the news within the night watch. What about you? Why didn't you return after you healed? Our people have been looking for you. It was not until recently that they discovered your whereabouts, Gerald said. Dr. Manning asked me to pay attention to your situation before I came to Sacramento. I didn't expect you to come to me. Caroling frowned. I won't go back until I get my revenge. I will have to go everywhere to carry out missions after I return. I'll have no time at all. For the past 3 years, I have been hunting the people in the battle. What about you? Why didn't you go back? After recovering your memory, they said that hiding myself in the city can help with their missions. I thought it made sense, so I stayed, Gerald said with a smile. Humph, Caroling snorted. Gerald asked, what's wrong? Nothing. Caroling pouted and said, I'm hungry. Treat me to a meal. I want to eat the most expensive and best food. In the past 3 years, I have been eating junk food my disciple bought me. To avoid watchmen, I don't dare to use my bank card and sell my property. I have lost weight. Beside them, Eric rolled his eyes. He cursed in his heart, you eat so much every day. I was so hungry that I lost weight, okay. He didn't dare to say this. Okay, you can eat wherever you want. Gerald smiled. I will let you eat until you are satisfied. Eric's eyes lit up. I know the best restaurant in Sacramento, but the price is a bit expensive. Why didn't you take me there? Caroling glared at Eric. Hey, Eric smiled bitterly. That restaurant is called Splendor Restaurant. It was meant for rich people. The restaurant has a membership system. One can get an iron membership if he deposits $8,000 in the membership card. A person will have to spend at least $160 when eating on the first floor. With your big appetite, I'm afraid I will go bankrupt if we eat there. Gerald was surprised. It sounded like this restaurant was somewhat similar to Marriott Hotel in Los Angeles. Say that again. Caroling glanced at Eric. I'm sorry, Eric said. Gerald was amused. He looked at Eric. Your disciple is quite interesting. Caroling said proudly, I trained him for 3 years, but he only got 5th place on the Underworld killer list. He's too useless. You have to know that you have become watchman number 0 after 3 years of being a watchman. It took me 5 years to become watchman no. 2 at that time, everyone on the Underworld killer list would avoid us. Eric has a foundation, yet he only got 5th. After 3 years. Eric smiled embarrassedly. At this time, Caroling said, well, there is one more thing. I hope you can bring Eric to night watch. I won't go back until I take revenge. Gerald nodded. Okay, I will stay in the city. When the time comes, you can take action with me. Caroling did not refuse. Then, she touched her belly and said, let's go and eat. I am starving. Gerald nodded. They hailed a taxi. After getting into the car, Eric took the initiative to sit in front. In the back seat, Caroling was holding Gerald's hand as if she was afraid that Gerald would leave. Gerald just let her hold him. Around noon, they arrived at Splendor Restaurant. It was a building with an exotic style. Gerald glanced at it and saw a total of 5 floors. Although dishes here were quite expensive, many customers came here because it was the most famous restaurant in Sacramento, as Eric said. Most of the customers here were rich people in Sacramento. Gerald touched his nose and said, do we have to deposit more money in the membership card if we want to eat on the higher floor? Eric nodded. Yes, but we can just eat on the first floor. Anyway, I feel that the upper floors are more spacious, but the food there won't be much tastier. Caroline gritted her teeth. She glared at Eric and asked, "Did you bring other women here?" Eric said with guilt, "How is that possible? To satisfy you, I have to live on a tight budget every day. You don't allow me to kill people to earn money. I am poor as hell. How can I have the money to make out with girls?" Humph. Caroline glared at him. Gerald nodded. "All right, then we'll eat on the first floor." With that, the three walked toward the door. There were 6 beautiful women in traditional clothes standing at the door. Seeing the three, 6 beauties bowed at the same time. "Welcome." Hearing the pleasant voice, Gerald felt that it was worth it to spend $160 just to hear their voice. "May I ask which floor you are going to eat on?" At the same time, a woman in black clothes walked toward them. "We'll get a membership card," Gerald said with a smile. The woman's eyes lit up. Gerald did not notice that when they went to apply for a membership card, Tyrone also walked into Splendor restaurant with a few people behind him. When Tyrone saw Gerald, a sinister smile appeared on his face. Beside him were 4 young people, 2 men and 2 women. The 2 women were also beautiful, but they looked similar to those female internet celebrities. They were holding the arms of the 2 young men. One of the men had a large tattoo on his arm, while the other had a cold expression with his hands in his trouser pockets. Seeing Tyrone's gaze, the tattooed young man glanced at Gerald. His gaze landed on Caroline. Although he just saw her back, Caroline's perfect figure made him lick his lips. "Do you know the 3 people?" the tattooed man asked. "Arnold." Tyrone gave him a flattering smile and said, "You must have heard of this person. He's Gerald Kenneth, the guy who raped Bree 9 years ago." "Him," the tattooed man said with a faint smile. "Do you know the woman beside him?" Tyrone took a look and had a trace of envy in his eyes. "I don't know her. I have to admit that Gerald is lucky enough to meet so many beauties. Although he has been in prison for a few years, there are many top beauties around him." Doreen brought 3 beauties from Los Angeles with her, and all of them knew him. He had a good relationship with Jessica and Daphne. Now, he has another beauty around him. I'm wondering where he met her. At this time, a waitress dressed in traditional clothes came over and said, "Welcome, may I know if you want to eat on the 5th floor?" The waitress recognized the people in front of her. To be precise, she knew the 3 men. Tyrone was an internet celebrity, and he knew many people. The tattooed man next to him was Arnold Carey. Arnold might not be as famous as Tyrone to people all over the country, but among young people in Sacramento, his name was well known. The main reason was his father. His father was called Javier Carey 20 years ago. He was the most powerful person in the underworld in Sacramento. Along with economic development, gangsters began to do proper business. Their business was mostly about nightclubs and real estate. For example, Amo started the Flame Bar with Arnold. In Sacramento, although people like the Kenneth family were odd, they were not that scary. People like Arnold were the real ones. Others wouldn't dare to provoke because no one knew what Arnold would do behind their backs if he was offended. And the man who looked a bit cold was called Cone Dobbin. He was also somebody. His grandfather was called Darian Dobbin, the only person in Sacramento. Ads by Pub Future, who owned a diamond card. The 3 might not be the richest, but they had a high status. No one was willing to provoke them. Tyrone chuckled. "Arnold, are you interested in that woman?" Arnold licked his lips and said, "She looks pretty." Cone frowned and said, "Don't cause trouble here." "Don't worry, I won't." Tyrone smiled. On the other side, Gerald got a membership card at the door. This place wasn't extravagant. As long as one had a membership card, they could spend money on any floor. The more they topped up, the higher the discount they would get. "May I know which floor you want to eat on?" the waitress asked with a smile when she saw that Gerald had applied for a membership card. The first floor. Gerald smiled. Then, the waitress brought them to an empty table. After they sat down, the waitress handed the menu to Gerald and said, "This is the menu." This was a high-end place, and the menu was thick. There was a dish on each page as well as a picture of it. All of the dishes looked appetizing. There were not many dishes available on the first floor. The menu had about 20 to 30 pages, which meant that the same number of dishes were available. The higher the floor, the more choices there would be. After Caroline took the menu, she didn't open it. Instead, she handed the menu to the waitress. "We want everything on the menu." "What?" The waitress did not seem to understand. Beside them, the corners of Gerald's and Eric's mouths twitched. "It means we'd like all the dishes you have here," Caroline said. Eric looked at Gerald resignedly as if he was saying that he couldn't afford to satisfy Caroline's needs. Gerald glanced at the menu just now. The cheapest dishes on the menu were worth hundreds and thousands for the expensive ones. Most people here only had a few dishes on the table because the dishes came in large portions. Caroline's request caught everyone off guard. Gerald said to the waitress, "Just follow her instructions. Don't worry, we can finish them." Caroline smiled at Gerald. "Great. You're much better than my disciple in these 3 years." "Alas, I don't want to talk about it." Eric smiled in embarrassment and did not say anything. At this time, a sarcastic voice sounded, "TSK, Gerald, are you here to make out with a girl again?" Smiling face, "Casual date is just a click away. Can you afford to pay for the dishes here?" Gerald frowned and looked at Tyrone. Before Gerald spoke, coldness flashed in Caroline's eyes. She said indifferently, "I seem to have heard a dog barking." "Gerald, do you raise one?" Tyrone was stunned. Then, he smiled and said, "Beauty, you probably don't know that the person next to you right now is a rapist. He knocked the victim out before raping her. You have to be careful and don't fall for his trap." After saying that, Tyrone pointed at the other 2 men and said, "Do you see the 2 over there?" Gerald and Caroline glanced at the door at the same time and saw Cone and Arnold. "They are Arnold Carey and Cone Dobbin," Tyrone said proudly. Gerald smiled. "You know a lot of rich guys." Hearing this, Tyrone became smug. Then, he said to Caroline, "Beauty, why eat on the first floor? My friends want to invite you to the 5th floor to have lunch with us." The customers at the table next to them widened their eyes when they heard Tyrone's words. One would have to spend tens of thousands of dollars on the 5th floor on average. Most people couldn't afford to eat lunch there. Those people's gazes made Tyrone thrilled. He said to Caroline, "Beauty, can I have the honor to invite you? Cone and Arnold are looking forward to it." "You are just a watching dog for those rich guys," Gerald sneered. "With what you wear, you like a clown." Tyrone's expression changed. "Look." At this time, Caroline made a sound. "Not interested. You are a man, yet you are wearing heavy makeup." Gerald is right. "You are like a clown. Get lost, or I'll lose my appetite." Tyrone was dumbfounded. He didn't expect Caroline to refuse. He thought that in Sacramento, no woman would refuse the requests from Cone and Arnold. Ordinary women were eager to get close to them. Rich women would also agree because of their identities. However, when Tyrone mentioned the 2, Caroline's face was full of disdain as if she did not take them seriously. Tyrone swallowed. At this time, behind him, Arnold walked over and patted him on the shoulder. He looked at Gerald with disdain, then at Caroline. He said indifferently, "Beauty, it's a bit too much to say that Cone and I are dogs." As he spoke, he looked at Gerald again and said flatly, "Are you Gerald? The guy who raped Bree?" Gerald touched his nose, looked up at Arnold, and asked, "What's the matter?" "Nothing. It's just that such a high-end place is not for you." Arnold looked at Gerald with a smile. Then at Caroline, and said, "Beauty, I will let you see who I am." As he spoke, he waved his hand. A waitress came over and asked, "Can I help you?" "Get your manager here and then get them out." Arnold looked at Gerald and Caroline with a smile. The waitress was a girl in a dress who looked to be in her 20s. Splendor Restaurant hired waitresses only, and most of them were good looking. She obviously knew Arnold. Then she looked at Gerald, frowned, and said, "Mr. Carey, we aren't allowed to do that." "Come again. Don't you know who I am?" Arnold frowned and looked at her. "I do. It's just, we never drive the diners out." The waitress quickly said. "You do not know me after all." Arnold glanced at her with contempt. Then he said, "Keep this in mind. I, Arnold Carey, am allowed to do anything I please." Hearing that, Gerald and Caroline exchanged looks, seeing a hint of a smile in each other's eyes. Arnold continued to look at the waitress and said, "Do you want your job or not? You can't call the shots. Get your manager here." The commotion soon attracted some people's attention. Soon, a woman in her 30s wearing business attire and glasses walked over. She smiled and said, "Hey, Mr. Carey. What set you off?" Arnold glanced at her. Then he looked at Gerald and Caroline and said lightly, "Get them out." The manager of Splendor Restaurant frowned and said, "Mr. Carey, I'm afraid I can't do that. We are running a business here. Kicking diners out isn't the way we do things. They offended me. I invited this beautiful woman to dinner. She refused me and looked down on one. What I want is simple. I want her to realize that she has made a mistake," Arnold said lightly. Beside him, Tyrone looked at Gerald complacently and said, "Besides, the man here is a rapist. Hale was sent to jail after being charged with rape. Do you want a man like him to dine here at Splendor Restaurant? Aren't you worried about your reputation?" Arnold looked up and frowned. "Of course, you can stick to your guns and not throw them out. However, that means that from today onwards, I, Cone, and our friends will not come to Splendor Restaurant ever again." Splendor Restaurant was a high-end place. In other words, the diners here were basically regular customers. People like Arnold were important customers. His friends would make Splendor Restaurant profit at least $160,000 every month. Tyrone said with a smile, "Gerald, if I were you, I would have got out voluntarily and asked the waitress was a girl in a dress who looked to be in her 20s. Splendor Restaurant hired waitresses only, and most of them were good looking. She obviously knew Arnold. Then she looked at Gerald, frowned, and said, "Mr. Carey, we aren't allowed to do that." "Come again. Don't you know who I am?" Arnold frowned and looked at her. "I do. It's just, we never drive the diners out." The waitress quickly said. "You do not know me after all." Arnold glanced at her with contempt. Then he said, "Keep this in mind. I, Arnold Carey, am allowed to do anything I please." Hearing that, Gerald and Caroline exchanged looks, seeing a hint of a smile in each other's eyes. Arnold continued to look at the waitress and said, "Do you want your job or not? You can't call the shots. Get your manager here." Smiling face casual date is just a click away. Ads by Pub Future. The commotion soon attracted some people's attention. Soon, a woman in her 30s wearing business attire and glasses walked over. She smiled and said, "Hey, Mr. Carey, what set you off?" Arnold glanced at her. Then he looked at Gerald and Caroline and said lightly, "Get them out." The manager of Splendor Restaurant frowned and said, "Mr. Carey, I'm afraid I can't do that. We are running a business here. Kicking diners out isn't the way we do things. They offended me. I invited this beautiful woman to dinner. She refused me and looked down on me. What I want is simple. I want her to realize that she has made a mistake," Arnold said lightly. Beside him, Tyrone looked at Gerald complacently and said, "Besides, the man here is a rapist. He was sent to jail after being charged with rape. Do you want a man like him to dine here at Splendor Restaurant? Aren't you worried about your reputation?" Arnold looked up and frowned. Of course, you can stick to your guns and not throw them out. However, that means that from today onwards, I, Cone, and our friends will not come to Splendor Restaurant ever again. Splendor Restaurant was a high-end place. In other words, the diners here were basically regular customers. People like Arnold were important customers. His friends would make Splendor Restaurant profit at least $160,000 every month. Tyrone said with a smile, Gerald, if I were you, I would have got out voluntarily and asked the woman next to you to dine with Arnold. In Sacramento, provoking Arnold won't be a smart move. For a moment, the manager was in a pickle. She looked at Gerald and Caroling and said politely, Gentlemen, miss, why don't? What's going on? At this time, a loud voice sounded. Not far away, a man wearing a suit were they. Buzz cut came down from upstairs. He looked in his 40s or 50s with a straight back. He was in high spirits. The manager quickly bowed and said, Mr. Croft. Arnold said lightly, Mr. Croft, these people are pissing me off, kick them out otherwise, my friends and I will never dine here again. Harper Croft frowned. He looked at Cone next to him. Cone frowned slightly and said to Harper, Harper, these people are a bit of trouble indeed. Harper looked towards Gerald and the others. The moment he saw Gerald and Caroling, his entire face could not help but tremble slightly. Gerald and Caroling were puzzled. Obviously, Harper knew them. However, they didn't know him. Mr. Croft let out a breath and walked towards Gerald and Arnold. Next to them, Tyrone and Arnold were smug. They were already picturing the scene where Gerald and the others were kicked out. Cone brought the two women to the front. Harper walked in front of Gerald and Caroling. Then he bowed slightly and said, Sorry for ruining your meal, gentleman, miss. No need to apologize to them, Tyrone said. The man here is a rapist, a scum of society. Don't apologize to them. Just kick them out. Arnold chuckled and looked at Gerald and Caroling mockingly. He smiled and said, Gorgeous, now you know who the so-called thwack. Suddenly, Harper, who was bowing, turned around and raised his hand. In an instant, he slapped Tyrone and Arnold in the face. Smiling face, casual date is just a click away. The crisp sound made the entire first floor hall quiet, and everyone looked over. After a short moment of shock, Arnold was furious. He raised his fist and scolded, You old fucking bastard. How dare you? Cone quickly pulled him and stopped him from continuing. Harper looked at Arnold indifferently and said, If you don't want to eat here, get out. Losing you won't make a difference to my business. If you still want to eat here, apologize to them. Arnold was pissed off. Beside him, Tyrone was even more confused. He even suspected that he was dreaming. He looked at Gerald and Caroling and found that they were looking at them with half smiles. Tyrone then looked around and found that they had attracted everyone's attention. Being slapped in public made him feel his face hurt even more, and he was utterly humiliated. You want me to apologize to them? Arnold sneered. Harper Croft, I will remember the slap. I am not done with you. Cone, who had kept silent, frowned. He did not say anything to Harper. Instead, he looked at Gerald and said calmly, Gerald, apology of me and Arnold is too much for you. Although it was Mr. Croft who slapped Tyrone and Arnold, you will be held responsible. Gerald shrugged indifferently and did not say anything. Cut the crap. Get out. And don't come here ever again, Harper said impatiently. Arnold sneered and looked at Gerald and Caroling. He licked his lips and said, Good for you. This isn't over and you, woman. Remember this. Sooner or later, I will make you crawl onto my bed and beg me to spare you. A cold light flashed across Caroling's eyes. Gerald shook his head at her. Let's go. Arnold gritted his teeth. Every minute he stayed became more humiliating. Seeing them leave, Harper looked at Gerald and Caroling and said, Dear guests, I'm sorry for my mismanagement. Please come with me to the 6th floor to dine. Your meal today will be on the house. Cohn and Arnold, who had not yet walked out of the restaurant, were stunned. They stopped, and Cohn even looked back in shock. Splendor Restaurant had a total of 6 floors, but only 5 floors were open to the public. Cohn knew the 6th floor was for Harper to entertain the honored guests exclusively. The 6th floor wouldn't even open once a year. Cohn thought, my grandfather is friends with Harper, but even my grandfather has never been to the 6th floor. And now, Harper is inviting those people to the 6th floor. How can this be? I know who Gerald is after Tyrone's introduction. There's no way Harper would invite such a person to the 6th floor. Is it a way to win over other guests? Cohn was suspicious. He looked at Caroling again and said, or is the woman not as simple as she looks? When she faced Arnold and me, she sounded so calm. Just as he was suspicious, Gerald and Caroling had already stood up. They walked upstairs. At the same time, Eric winked at Arnold and Cohn, making Arnold even angrier. Fuck, Arnold cursed. Why are you still standing here? Do you enjoy being humiliated? With that, he strode out of the door. Gerald and the others went to the 6th floor. The 6th floor was quite quiet. They entered a private room. Just as they entered, Harper let out a sigh of relief. Then his body trembled as he said, greetings, Watchman No. 0. Watchman No. 2. Nice to meet you, Watchman No. 2. Watchman No. 0. His voice was trembling. At the same time, he slowly raised his hand to his head and made a standard military salute. Gerald's heart trembled a bit. He was wondering why Harper knew him and helped him. He now understood after hearing Harper's words. Caroling's expression changed slightly. She looked at Harper and asked, are you a watchman? Harper sighed and said, I have been retired for about 5 years till now, and I am now the owner of Splendor Restaurant. I don't think you've heard of me, since I am just a nobody. I didn't make it to the top 1000 among the watchmen. Why did you retire? Caroling asked. Harper sighed and said, I was badly wounded in the line of duty. I was lucky to come back alive, and after that, I found it too much for me, so I stepped down. As he spoke, he seemed to be nostalgic. Speaking of which, when I was still in the group, you were in your prime. Are you on some sort of mission now that you are in Sacramento? Gerald shook his head and said, no. We came here by chance. I have a bad reputation in Sacramento. I was wrongly accused of rape. I came back this time to do some digging and clear my name. Harper was stunned. Then he nodded and said, I have heard about this. In fact, I am a friend of Leandro. He came to me and asked me about this before, but there was no proof. You need to find proof, right? Gerald said with a smile. Harper nodded and said, indeed. Watchman number 0, it's a pleasure to see you out in the field. Because of the night watches code, I kept a low profile and didn't want to expose either of you, so I didn't overdo it. Otherwise, I would have made Arnold kneel and apologize to you. Those rich brats just can't behave themselves. Gerald waved his hand and said, it's fine. Anyway, thanks. Harper quickly shook his head and said, you have made so many efforts for the world. Don't thank. 1. The dishes you ordered will be served immediately, and I'll send you 4 of our specialty dishes. They are all on the house. In addition, each of you will receive our black gold membership cards. You never have to pay when you eat here. You are being too generous, Gerald said politely. Don't mention it, Harper smiled. Next to them, Eric was so thrilled that he was about to cry. Eric thought happily, the membership cards of Splendor Restaurant, to a certain extent, have the same effect as new banks cards. They are perfect for showing off. Smiling face casual date is just a click away. Ads by Pub Future. With the black gold membership card, countless women will be throwing themselves at me. I can bring them to Splendor Restaurant to eat for free. Damn, I'll be surrounded by women. Sure enough, I have become so lucky after seeing Gerald. Enjoy. I still have some things to do, So I will leave now. Harper then asked for Gerald and Carolyn's numbers. Then he continued, while you are in Sacramento, if anything, call me at once. Although I am not the richest in Sacramento, my words still mean something among those big families. Gerald nodded and said, thank you. Not long after Harper left, the many dishes they ordered were served one after another. Carolyn began to eat defiantly, mumbling as she ate, these are so good. Gerald was always amazed by how much Carolyn could eat. In Night Watch, besides Watchman No. 2, Carolyn was also known as Piggy. The nickname fit her perfectly. Carolyn could eat more than a piggy. Gerald was smiling during the entire meal. He was satisfied enough to see Carolyn again. He could trust his life with Carolyn. He could sleep soundly at night as long as she was by his side. While Gerald and the other two were eating, at the same time, 5 people were sitting in a sports car. Tyrone was the driver. He sat in the front and drove. He did not dare to say a word. Cone sat in the passenger seat, looking gloomy. Arnold sat in the back seat, swearing in a loud voice, Cone, why were you fucking afraid of that old bastard? If you hadn't stopped me, I'd have beaten the shit out of him. Cone frowned and said, you would have been in serious trouble if I hadn't stopped you. Harper is very low-key, and my grandfather always respects him. You know that old man from the Landon family, right? He was one of the richest in Sacramento. He made a scene in Splendor restaurant one day, and after a month, the Landon family went bankrupt. Anyway, I'm certain Harper isn't a simple man. He has someone backing him up. We shouldn't mess with him. Fuck, Arnold cursed. I've never been so humiliated in my life. Tyrone hurriedly said, it was all Gerald's fault. You have no idea. After Gerald was released, he became very arrogant. He provoked Amo and Justin in succession. Really? Amo and Justin? Arnold asked in surprise. Yes. Gerald was the one who hurt Justin's hand. And Amo dotes on his sister a lot. Gerald raped Bree, so of course, Amo wouldn't let Gerald off the hook, Tyrone said. Awesome. Arnold's expression changed slightly. Let's call them over this evening. We have nothing better to do anyway. Let's come up with a way to mess with Gerald and have fun. Cone did not speak. He just blew the bangs on his forehead. Under Gerald and Eric's shocked eyes, Carolyn ate almost all the dishes on the table. Then she licked her lips, looking like she still wanted more. Smiling face, casual date is just a click away. You, Belly, have a great appetite. Gerald was stunned. He couldn't help but reach out and feel her. Carolyn's stomach was still so flat without a trace of flab. Gerald said confusedly, I don't get it. Where did all the food you ate go? Carolyn was used to Gerald's reaction. She said with satisfaction, the food here is great. I guess I'll be a regular here. I don't have to pay anyway. After that, she looked at Gerald and said, find some time and send Eric to Night Watch for training. Try to get him to catch up with us as soon as possible. At least he shouldn't be a drag. Now that Terry has left us, after revenge, we still need to go back and make the team complete. Gerald nodded and said, okay. Arrange for a time tomorrow. I'll let Dennis pick him up. Carolyn nodded. All right. I'll take him back and tell him what to do. Also, after I get back, I won't be seeing you often. Let's contact via line messages and phone calls. Gerald said, sure. Gerald, Carolyn, and Eric took the black gold membership cards, walked out of Splendor restaurant, and took taxis to leave. In the taxi, Eric looked at Carolyn and asked, Master, why didn't you tell him the truth? Carolyn let out a breath. I'm glad enough just to see him. I can handle it. Remember that you are not allowed to tell him anything. Eric pursed his lips and did not say anything else. Meanwhile, Gerald went to an internet cafe to play games for the whole afternoon. It was only at 6 o'clock that he took a taxi leisurely and went back. When he arrived at the entrance of the community, he got out of the car. Suddenly, he heard 2 Car horns. At the same time, a voice sounded, Gerald. Gerald turned around and saw a black car parked not far away. Then the car door was opened. A man in his 30s in a suit with greasy hair came out of the car. Gerald's expression changed slightly when he saw the man. The man was quite handsome. If one took a closer look, one would find that the man looked like Ricky a lot. The man was Cole, the first successor of the third generation of the Kenneth family. Cole walked up to Gerald with a face full of disdain. He sized Gerald up and said, "TSK, TSK. If that thing hadn't happened back then, you wouldn't have been so miserable right now. Well, I guess, your dad is rather capable. After all, he managed to become the vice president of Universe Group and even had enough money for you to take a taxi." Gerald glanced at Cole. Cole chuckled. "You haven't eaten yet, right? My dad and Stephen want to treat you to dinner. Personally, people like you are not qualified to sit with us. However, I can't disobey my dad's order. Not interested." Gerald curled his lips and turned to leave. "But Mason is already on his way. You'll put me in a quandary if you don't show up." Cole spread his hands. Cole spread out his hands helplessly and looked at Gerald with a half smile. Cole was very pretentious. He had been very pretentious since Gerald could remember. In the Kenneth family, Cole was the eldest among the third generation of direct descendants. He grew up with nothing but money. Since he was the first successor of the Kenneth family, he had been used to being arrogant. He never treated anyone with respect. Also, Cole was quite capable. He was 3 years older than Gerald. Gerald entered school at 18 years old. Meanwhile, Cole was 21 years old, and he was already a graduate student in one of the top 5 schools in the world. Cole skipped grades since he was a child. He had a perfect academic performance. Gerald was also a good student when he was a child. In addition, Mason was very capable at that time, so Gerald was valued by the Kenneth family a lot. Gerald was raised to be Cole's right-hand man. Gerald belonged to a branch of the Kenneth family, so he might be allowed to be in charge of some companies, but the Kenneth family would never let him inherit the family's shares. Gerald was only on their payroll. Therefore, Cole always felt superior to Gerald ever since they were kids. Cole was even more arrogant right now. He despised Gerald thoroughly, which could be told from the way he looked at Gerald and his tone. Gerald looked at Cole, exhaled, walked over, and wanted to open the car door. "My car is not for someone like you." Cole stood in front of the car. Then he said indifferently, "They will be waiting for you in Splendor Restaurant. Take a taxi there yourself. I will be waiting for you at the entrance of Splendor Restaurant. Only my father is generous enough to let you go to such a high-end restaurant." After that, he opened the car door and sat in the driver's seat. He started the car at once and drove away. Gerald pulled a long face. Cole's father, Holden Kenneth, was the current head of the Kenneth family. Cole's grandfather had already stepped down. Gerald had no idea why they summoned him and Mason to a meal. Without Mason, Gerald would have ignored their invitation already. Yet Mason was already on his way, so he had to go there as well. "Fuck me. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have come back at all," Gerald cursed. He just came back from somewhere near Splendor Restaurant. Ads by Pub Future. Gerald grabbed a taxi and went back to Splendor Restaurant. Soon, the taxi stopped at Splendor Restaurant. There were already a lot of diners inside. Cole was standing at the door in a suit. He was still disdainful when seeing Gerald. He waved his hand and said, "Let's get inside." They walked into Splendor Restaurant and went to the 5th floor. Unlike the first floor, which was with a hall and booths, the 5th floor had nothing but individual private rooms. The environment here was much quieter and much better than the first floor. "Do you know anything about Splendor Restaurant?" After arriving at the 5th floor, Cole chuckled. Then he said, "Splendor Restaurant is the best in Sacramento, especially the food served on the 5th floor. It is the most expensive and delicious in Sacramento. I don't get it, why did Dad invite you here? What a waste. Gerald ignored Cole. Seeing that Gerald did not speak, Cole sneered. Then he took the lead. Gerald followed him to a private room. Then Cole pushed the door open and said, "Dad, Uncle Stephen, Gerald is here." Gerald followed Cole to the door. Then he frowned slightly. There was a large round table in the room, and there were already a lot of people sitting at it, including Stephen, whom Gerald had been looking for all this time. Stephen looked leisured while holding a glass of wine in his hand, shaking it slightly. In addition, the burly Amo was also inside the room. Beside Amo sat a girl. When Gerald saw the girl, his whole body could not help but tremble slightly. The girl was very pretty, and she looked somehow like Doreen. She had long black hair and wore a long black dress, sitting next to Amo quietly. She raised her head and saw Gerald walking into the room. She glanced at him, and a complicated look flashed through her eyes. Then she lowered her head and looked at the table. The girl was Bree. She was the other party involved in Gerald's accused crime 9 years ago. Gerald did not expect to see Bree here. Mason was also among those people. He sat in situ a little awkwardly with a sullen face. Obviously, the people here had said something that wasn't nice. Holden, who was sitting at the table, waved his hand and said, "Gerald, it has been 9 years since we last met. You have become much more mature now. Grab a seat." Cole chuckled and walked past Gerald. He pulled out a chair and sat down. Gerald's line of sight swept over everyone. Then he looked at Mason. "Dad, let's go." Huh. Hearing that, everyone frowned. Cole snorted and said, "Gerald, who do you think you are? You should be honored to be here. Be grateful." Gerald didn't bother to respond to Cole. Suddenly, Holden chuckled and looked at Mason. "Mason, think. Do you want to have a meal with us or not?" Mason frowned, looked at Gerald, and said, "Gerald, come here and sit down." Gerald's expression changed slightly. He looked at Mason. Then he walked to Mason's side, pulled out a chair, and sat down. Next to him, Cole smiled disdainfully. "I thought you were backboned. Yet you did as you were told eventually." "Cole, that's enough," Holden said. Then he looked at Gerald and smiled. "I invited you here today for 3 main reasons." Gerald was silent. Beside him, Mason looked hesitant. Obviously, he knew something. Holden continued, "I'll begin with the first. I heard you've been doing some digging regarding what happened 9 years ago. Since you got back." Gerald was slightly stunned. He thought, it must have been Kiri who told him. "I'm surprised that Holden would ask me about this. So what if I say yes?" Gerald asked. Holden smiled and then looked at Bree beside him. He said, "What happened 9 years ago was a heavy blow for Bree. By looking into it now, you will only make her suffer more. After you are released, we have talked to Bree and her family. We advise you to stop investigating." Gerald grinned. He said with a half smile, "Sorry, I won't take your advice." Wait till I finish," Holden said. "After you get back to Sacramento, due to certain reasons, Henley have not been seeing eye to eye with each other, and you have been in conflicts with Amo. We can help you make all these things go away. Also, we can promise that they won't stand in your way from now on." "And then the second matter," Holden said indifferently, "well, it has something to do with Mason. Mason is now the vice president of Universe Group. Our family and Universe Group have been competing in many industries. For some reason, Universe Group always enjoys competing with us, which is not good for us at all. So, I hope Mason can be a peacemaker and help us achieve a win-win situation with Universe Group." Gerald chuckled. Only he knew that he was the reason why Universe Group and the Kenneth family were at loggerheads. Holden continued, "As for the third thing, well, it's very simple. As long as you say yes to those two things I mentioned, I can propose getting your names back on the family tree. You and Mason can be a part of the Kenneth family again. Gerald was slightly stunned. He now knew the reason why Mason was struggling. He thought, I don't care if I can be a part of the Kenneth family again. After all, they treated Dad and me so badly back then. We have already gotten over it. However, the first thing Holden mentioned concerns me. He called it a piece of advice, but I know. He was threatening me. He was telling me that if I continue to pursue the matter, both the Cowsey family and the Kenneth family will come after me. Dad is worried about me being retaliated against by two families. Gerald glanced at Bree, who was with a lowered head, and said, Dad, let's go. In fact, Gerald had no intention of responding to Holden's requests at all. Holden wanted him to drop his investigation. Why should he? Holden threatened him. However, Gerald had been threatened by those big families several times, and he took none of them seriously. The assets Gerald now owned worldwide were no less than that of the Kenneth family. What was more, Gerald had night watch as his backup. As for the second thing Holden mentioned, it was essentially his pleading for Mason's help, since the competition between Universe Group and the Kenneth family had become too much for the Kenneth family. Yet Holden made it sound like he was doing Mason a favor, and all Gerald and Mason got was the right to become part of the Kenneth family again. How ridiculous. Someone set Gerald up 9 years ago, which was the reason why Gerald got locked up. If he had not joined Night Watch, he would have been imprisoned forever. Mason was kicked out of the family. What was more, when he was trying to find a job in Sacramento after that, the Kenneth family interfered. They knew how capable Mason was, and they were worried that Mason would start his own business and affect them. Those were not the best years for Mason. He was only doing better until Gerald owned Universe Group. Therefore, Gerald was not interested in being part of the Kenneth family again at all. Quite contrarily, Gerald hated the Kenneth family's guts. He didn't bother to talk to those from the Kenneth family anymore, since any words would be unnecessary. Therefore, he asked Mason to leave with him. Mason was slightly stunned. Yet he knew what Gerald was thinking judging from Gerald's words. Though he was worried, he preferred to let Gerald make the decision. After all, Gerald wanted to clear his name, and that was what Mason wanted as well. What's that supposed to mean? Cole slapped the table abruptly. Then he said, Gerald, remember, we are in Sacramento. Gerald raised his head, looked at Cole, and then looked at Holden and Stephen next to them. He said indifferently, you don't want me to look into it. Are you feeling guilty about something? Guilty. Holden smiled and said, there is nothing to be guilty about. The matter had already happened, and you were sentenced. There's nothing you can do to undo it. We just figure that it has been 9 years, and you've been released. The Cowsey family wants you to drop it as well for Bree's sake. Of course, you may choose to continue. However, you should bear the consequences in mind. Ads by Pub Future. Gerald chuckled. He thought, consequences. I've heard threats like this all my life. I don't even bother to talk back. Anyway, whatever you people from the Kenneth family are planning, just come at me. I won't show mercy. I don't want to waste my time on you. I'm not here to negotiate with you. The only reason I'm here is that I'm worried about Dad. I have to bring him back. Dad, let's go, Gerald said with a smile. Mason nodded and stood up. Cole sneered, Gerald, we've already ordered the food for you. The bottle of wine here costs $50,000. Along with those dishes, the meal today will be roughly $64,000. Since you don't appreciate our good intentions, pay the bill for you and your father before you go. Cole waved his hand and said, waitress. A beautiful waitress who served them specifically at the door came in and asked, what can I do for you? We go Dutch for this meal. Those two people here are leaving. Do the math and charge them, Cole said calmly. Mason turned to look at them. $64,000 was nothing to Cole and the others. Cole only did this because he wanted to upset Mason and Gerald. Mason frowned. Cole sneered, Mason, don't tell me you don't even have $16,000. The waitress looked embarrassed, but she still looked at Gerald and Mason and said, it will be $70,000 in total. Since Mr. Holden is a platinum member here, you can get a 30% discount in total. The card is for us, not them. Deduct their part, Cole said. Mason pulled a long face. He did nothing but show up, and he never touched the food on the table. However, those from the Kenneth family were asking him and Gerald to pay $16,000. How unreasonable was that? Gerald looked at the waitress and then looked at Cole next to him. Then he took out a black card with gold linings from his pocket and calmly placed it in front of the beautiful waitress. The beautiful waitress was stunned and then quickly said, this way, please. Gerald put away the card and walked out with Mason. Since Gerald had his back to the others, they did not get to see what had happened. Seeing that Gerald and Mason left without paying, Cole hurriedly shouted, why are you letting them go? I told you, we will go Dutch for this meal. Are you going to let us pay for them? The waitress quickly said, they have the black gold membership card issued by our restaurant. Which means they don't have to pay. The black gold membership card. Cole was stunned. How could he have that? Aren't you going to verify? The others were stunned as well. They even felt like dreaming. Smiling face casual date is just a click away. Gerald and Cole had the black gold membership card issued by Splendor Restaurant. None of them had that. Next to them, Holden frowned and said, it should be Leandro's. Leandro is friends with Harper, the restaurant's owner. Everyone knows Leandro has a black gold membership card from here. Cole snorted coldly. He was quite unhappy to see Gerald and Mason leaving so easily. Bree gritted her teeth and looked at Amo. She said, Amo, I'll excuse myself for a while. Amo sighed and did not say anything. Bree got up and walked out. Seeing Bree leave, Stephen shook his wine glass and looked at Holden beside him. He said, he has been in prison for 9 years. Of course, he is holding some grudge. So, Holden let out a breath and looked at Amo. He said indifferently, Amo, go out for a while. Amo frowned. Holden smiled and said, don't worry. We have promised to cooperate with you, and we will not go back on our word. With this project, I'm sure your family can survive the crisis. Thank you, Holden. As Amo spoke, he stood up and left the room. The world was full of changes. The Cauci family used to be prestigious in Sacramento. Yet after 9 years, they now had to make compromises. They wanted to become relatives with the Zimto family through marriage at first. However, the Zimto family was also in trouble. Therefore, they had no choice but to cooperate with the Kenneth family. After seeing Amo leave, Holden glanced at Stephen and said indifferently, make it clean. Leave. No traces. Don't worry. Holden shook the wine glass in his hand. The corners of his mouth were slightly raised, revealing a sinister smile. Gerald and Mason walked towards the first floor. Mason frowned as he asked, Gerald, how could you have the black gold membership card here? Well, Leandro gave it to me. Everyone here knows him, and it's of no use to him. He gets to eat here for free just by showing up. So, he gave the card to me, saying that I can eat here with my friends, Gerald said. Gerald figured that he could always use Leandro as an excuse anyway. Mason glanced at Gerald suspiciously. As they talked, they walked to the door. Gerald frowned and said, Dad, don't talk to the Kenneth family from now on. Whatever they say, or whenever they invite you to a meal, or something else, just ignore them. I have my plans. With Leandro here, they dare not do anything to me. Mason nodded and sighed, I'm still a bit worried. That's why I'm here today. He said, pressing the key, let's go home. Gerald nodded. Suddenly, a voice came from behind Gerald. Gerald. Gerald turned around and found Bree standing at the door, dressed in a knee-length black dress. She was like a goddess, calling his name. Gerald's expression changed slightly. He looked at Mason and said, "Dad, you may go ahead. I'll take a taxi myself later." Mason nodded, got into the car, and started the car. After Mason left, Bree walked to Gerald. Her eyes were full of complex emotions. She pursed her lips and said, "Let's go somewhere and talk." "Let's go somewhere and talk," Bree looked at Gerald and said calmly. Gerald was a little stunned. He stroked his nose. Both Bree and Doreen were from the Cousy family. However, the only thing they had in common was that they were pretty. Their personalities were worlds apart. Doreen was quiet, while Bree had a bad temper. She had been spoiled since she was a kid. 9 years ago, when Bree woke up, her first reaction was to go to the hotel kitchen. Then she ran after Gerald for several blocks with a knife in her hand. Right now, Bree followed him. Out. Gerald figured that either she cursed him or she beat him made sense. However, Bree was so gentle, and she wanted to talk. Gerald had mixed feelings. He could tell that Bree had changed a lot since what happened 9 years ago. Back then, they were close, since Bree was always with Doreen, and Gerald enjoyed hanging out with Doreen as well. "Okay." Gerald nodded. Bree walked in front, and Gerald followed her. Neither of them spoke. They went to a cafe and found a table to sit down at. Gerald felt a little awkward. He coughed and said, "I heard that you are married." Bree nodded. "Congratulations." Gerald coughed and scratched his head. Bree revealed a smile, raised her head, and said, "You are looking into what happened back then?" Gerald nodded and said, "Yes. Believe it or not, I was set up. I was drunk that day. I have no idea." Gerald paused and said, "I have no idea how we ended up having sex. And I don't know why the hotel surveillance showed that." Smiling face. Casual date is just a click away. Sign up and start meeting women in your area today. Ads by Pub Future. It was me who brought you into the hotel either. But I do know one thing. I don't want to be framed. Bree put her hand on the coffee mug, turned it slightly, and murmured, "I believe you." Huh. Gerald looked up at Bree. Bree sighed. She did not explain further. Instead, she said, "I was to be blamed as well. I reacted too strongly at that time. I chased you down several blocks with a kitchen knife, and that was why the thing couldn't go away. If we had dealt with it privately, such as getting married after graduation or something, maybe it would have been over. None of this would have happened." Gerald's heart skipped a beat. Doreen raised her head and looked at Gerald. Her eyes were a little red, but my family found out about it, and they felt humiliated. Things got too big to stop. Ah. Bree sighed and smiled bitterly. Then she wiped her moist eyes and said, "Sorry to let you see me like this." Gerald frowned. He was not used to who Bree was now. "Anyway, I believe you were set up, and if there's anything I can do for you, I will," Bree said. Gerald was speechless. To his surprise, Bree followed him out to offer her help. "There's no need. A lot of people might be implicated. Those from the Kenneth family made it clear that they didn't want me to look into this further, which means the Kenneth family's upper echelons might have had something to do with it as well. There is no need to drag you into this and put you in danger. Besides, I have a clue already," Gerald said with a smile. Bree was stunned. She looked at Gerald and then smiled. "You're much more mature than you were 9 years ago. I'm glad." Gerald felt that the atmosphere was a little awkward. He coughed and said, "Well, if there is nothing else, I will go home now. My folks are waiting for me to eat." "Friend me online," Bree said. Gerald was a bit reluctant. After all, Bree was married, and he had sex with her back then. If he friended her online, it would. Smiling face. Casual date is just a click away. Sign up and start meeting women in your area today. Make him feel that he was the third wheel. Yet he couldn't turn Bree down. In any case, Bree was the biggest victim of that incident back then. Though he was framed, it was also the fact that his imprisonment led him to night watch. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made it today. Gerald nodded. Okay. After friending Bree online, Gerald left the cafe as fast as he could. Seeing Gerald's back, Bree lifted her hair casually. A trace of sadness and unwillingness flashed across her eyebrows. She muttered, "Gerald, you still don't know anything about women." Walking to the side of the road, Gerald breathed a sigh of relief. He preferred fighting with those aged watchmen to being with Bree alone. When he reached the door, he heaved a sigh of relief. Suddenly, his phone rang. He picked up the phone and said, "Hello, Kiera, what's the matter?" Kiera said in a low voice, "Gerald, can you accompany me to an antique auction later?" Without waiting for Gerald to speak, Kiera hurriedly added, "A man is pestering me. He wants to go with me. I am a bit worried. I'm afraid that he might do something to me." Gerald pondered and nodded. "Okay, send me the address. It's at Blossom Hotel. I will wait for you at the entrance of the hotel," Kiera hastily said. Gerald nodded and hung up the phone. Then he called Mason and said, "Dad, I'm going to eat with a friend. Don't wait up." Mason was stunned for a moment, and then he said in a serious tone, "Gerald, Bree is already married." "You, Dad, come on. She has nothing to do with me now." Gerald was a bit helpless. After talking to Mason for a few seconds, he quickly hung up the phone. Gerald let out a breath, stopped a taxi, and rushed to Blossom Hotel. Soon, he arrived at the entrance of Blossom Hotel. Blossom Hotel was a 5-star hotel in Sacramento, and it was quite large. Kiera was standing at the entrance. Beside her stood a short, chubby man. He was talking to her flatteringly. "Kiera, I know. Antiques are your thing. If there's anything you like later, just tell me." Kiera said with a frown, "Thanks, but there's no need. I'll bid myself. Don't turn me down, okay? Since you went back to Sacramento, I have been trying to ask you out several times, but you never agreed. You are always at work. I have told my parents about you. They like you a lot in every aspect, including both your job and your family. They even want to invite your parents out for a meal," the man said with a smile. Kiera frowned and said, "Reese, I have told you many times already. I don't like you. Stop pestering." Tyrone came from a wealthy family. And Arnold, Cone, and Justin were even more loaded than him. They were all among the richest in Sacramento. They were sitting in the front row, and no one dared to provoke them. Arnold looked at Justin's bandaged hand and said with a smile, "TSK, TSK. Justin, come on. I can't believe you let an ex-con, an outcast of your family, do this to you. And he's doing fine no less. If I were you, I'd be so humiliated now." Justin snorted and sat in situ with his legs crossed. He curled his lips and said, "Tyrone told me something funny today. It's about you and Cone's incident in Splendor Restaurant. You wanted to kick Gerald out of the restaurant, yet you thought too highly of yourself in the end. It was you who got kicked out by Harper." Arnold glared at Tyrone and then sneered, "Sooner or later, I will show Harper the consequences of offending me." Then he looked at Justin and asked, "What do you think? Are you interested in teaching Gerald a lesson together with me?" "How?" Justin asked indifferently. "Easy. I provide men, and you provide the money we need," Arnold said. "Gerald has been strong since he was a kid. He is good at fighting. I know some fighters, and I have a lot of connections. I'll get someone to kick his ass, and you'll be responsible for compensation. How does it sound?" "No problem," Justin said calmly. Cone remained cool. Instead of getting involved with their conversation, he just sat in situ and said, "The auction is about to begin." Behind them, Gerald was in his seat. Kiera, who was beside him, said excitedly, "It is said that there will be a lot of valuable things in this auction. I don't think I'll be able to afford any of them. I'm just here window shopping. Gerald nodded. He knew something about antiques, yet he wasn't interested. Knowing antiques was simply a must. For Watchmen, Reese was behind them. He smiled and said, "It's okay. Kira, just tell me what you like, and I'll buy it." "For you." Kira frowned and ignored him. Reese nodded. Then he patted Gerald on the shoulder and said, "Asshole, get up and exchange seats with me." Gerald glanced at Reese, smiled, and then turned back. He had no intention of standing up at all. Reese gnashed his teeth, sneered, and thought, "Wait till the auction is over, you are doomed." Meanwhile, on a platform set up at the front, a light was moving slowly under the light, a beautiful ads by Pub Future woman who was dressed up walked slowly forward from the stage. "Hey, she looks familiar, I think I have seen her somewhere before." Gerald stroked his nose. "You don't know her." Kira was stunned. She whispered, "She is Cassidy Burrell, the pretty host, who is so popular in Sacramento now." "I see, so she is a star." Gerald stroked his nose again. He didn't pay much attention to celebrities. At the same time, Cassidy had already walked to the front with a charming smile on her face. Then she raised the mic and said, "Everyone, welcome to today's auction. We are very honored to invite you, the notables in Sacramento, to be here. Let's go straight to the auction part, shall we?" Since it was an auction today, there was no live broadcast or TV recording. Therefore, Cassidy directly announced the beginning of the auction. As she spoke, she held the mic in one hand and a hammer in the other. "The first lot is a painting that's hundreds of years old. It is the authentic work of Horace Kane, a famous ancient artist." Meanwhile, two beautiful women came forward with a painting in their arms and slowly unrolled it in front of everyone. Gerald glanced at the painting and smiled. "Really? No one is going up to verify if it's a fake?" "Humph. The host of today's auction, like us, is one of the biggest antique dealers in the country. Trading fakes will be the same as ruining his brand." Behind Gerald, Reese sneered. "Do you know the price of this painting? It's an astronomical figure for you. You are in for a treat today, since you get to see the world." "I see. No wonder you told Kira that she wouldn't get any fakes. After all, the items being auctioned today are all authentic. Anyway." Gerald curled his lips and smiled. Reese was so angry that his face turned slightly red. Kira, who was next to Gerald, said, "Wow. An authentic work of Horace. Check out the size. I think it is worth at least several $1 million. You like it?" Gerald asked. Kira said, "Anyone who digs antiques will like it." "Well, I'm not keeping my hopes up. There's no way I can afford it. I might collect some baubles, but such a top-grade object is too much for me." "Kira, I'll get it for you as long as you agree to be my girlfriend. I have a similar authentic work of Horace at home. Why don't I give both of them to you as gifts?" Reese said from behind. "You don't need to do that. Thanks," Kira said helplessly. Meanwhile, Cassidy, who was on stage, smiled and said, "The opening bid is $3.2 million. In the next second, behind Gerald, Reese raised the bidding paddle in his hand and said, $3.6 million. Many people looked at Reese. Someone said in surprise, "Reese Saxton from Nebula Antiques. Why is he here?" Nebula Antiques was owned by Reese's family. They had branches in antique markets all over the country, including Los. Smiling face casual date is just a click away. Sign up and start meeting women in your area today. Angelos. Seeing that he was recognized, Reese was smug. $4.2 million. In the next second, a cold voice sounded from the top right. Gerald looked in the direction where the sound rang out and saw a slim woman wearing sunglasses. Because of the sunglasses, he couldn't see her face, yet he figured that she was a beauty. Judging from her figure, Reese nodded coldly and said indifferently, $4.5 million. He raised the price by $300,000 each time. On the stage, Cassidy smiled and said, "Mr. Saxton, number 108, offered $4.5 million. Any bid. $5 million. It was still that woman. She looked calm. People kept bidding. $6 million. The price kept rising. Then, Justin, who was sitting in the front, said indifferently, $8.3 million. In the next second, the entire venue fell silent. The authentic work of Horace was priceless, yet due to the size of the painting, around $7 million was already more than enough. No one expected that Justin would offer $8.3 million. On the stage, Cassidy smiled and said, "Mr. Kenneth, number 3, offers $8.3 million. Any more bids?" Behind Gerald, Reese frowned deeply. The high price surprised him. He thought, besides, it's Justin who bids. If I compete with him, it will cost me a lot. Also, I will offend him. My family has money, but compared with the Kenneth family, we are nothing. I can mobilize only about $8.3 million. I can't afford to go beyond that. What is it? Why did you stop? Gerald turned around and looked at Reese with a half smile. Didn't you just say that you would buy it for Kiara? It's only $8.3 million now and you've already changed your mind. Or you don't have enough money to continue. Reese choked on Gerald's words. He gritted his teeth and looked at Gerald. Humph. What does it have to do with you whether I continue or not? At least I could offer $8.3 million. What about you? You were in prison for 9 years. $8.3 million is an astronomical figure for you, isn't it? Do you even have $80 on you? Why don't you raise your bidding paddle? If Gerald raised his paddle now, he would have to pay more than $8.3 million. Justin was sitting in the front row. He smiled. In his eyes, no one present would dare to compete with him. Even Cohn and Arnold, who were next to him, were not qualified. Cassidy also had a smile on her face. She said, calling once. Calling twice. Suddenly, in the back, Gerald raised his bidding paddle and said indifferently, $9.2 million. Wow. In an instant, many people looked at him.